Good morning, y'all. This is Bud Elliott, and this is the Nolecast. Want to do a couple quick updates this morning for you on various things that we have going on with the program, with the team, and I hope everybody had a great and happy Thanksgiving because I did. So, I hope you guys did as well. I want to start the show by thanking our sponsor, the Legendary Team. Chad does an excellent job getting you your home loan. 844 FSU loan. 844 FSU loan is the number to call. I've done it twice through him. Probably will do another one soon. Chad just does an awesome job for you. Customer service, knowledge of the industry, commitment to the process. And if you want somebody to talk a little Noles with you, there is no shortage of that. So give Chad a call, 844 FSU loan. That's 844 FSU loan. I will start with the Florida preview because I feel like that's the one we got to get out first here. This game is not expected to be super competitive. The line is, north of 2 touchdowns now, which is pretty insane for a Gators team to be favored by that much in Doak Campbell Stadium. Although a reduced capacity Doak Campbell, obviously these two teams are going in different directions here at the end of the season. DJ Lagway is playing quite well for the Gators. They just beat Ole Miss last week, and you can say that that Ole Miss gave them that game, but honestly, I don't totally agree with that. I thought Florida played good football. They have changed what they're doing a pretty good bit on defense. It looks like they are blitzing a whole lot less than they were early in the season, which probably fits their personnel a little bit more. They're actually running some similar stuff to what the Noles run in terms of, hey, let's keep everything in front, come up and try to tackle, protect the secondary, maybe let the defensive front win. But they're playing with good effort and clearly still have a lot of belief in what they're doing. I bet a lot of that is due to Lagway, who appears to be a really special player. We knew he was a special prospect. It was just would the light come on, and how fast would that light come on for him? And so they beat Ole Miss last week. They beat Florida. So they beat LSU as well. And so they come into this game really hot. FSU comes into this game really not. It's a rivalry game. I'm not exactly sure how many guys are like totally fully into this thing right now. Just not great. So we'll see. I don't expect FSU to win. Could they win? I think it's possible. Like if the defense plays like it played against Miami for a decent bit of that game in terms of showing up, being physical. Lagway has thrown a good number of passes recently that were really questionable and got away with it. I think he had 2 or 3 dropped interceptions against LSU. And against Ole Miss, he made some ridiculous throws with guys just hanging all over him. And look, that's to his credit because the guy has incredible strength. He's huge, very mobile and a good arm. And honestly, I like talking to the kid a lot when we're out of the camps. I think he does a really good job and is a bright kid. If you have to paint a picture that, hey, this is how this is going to go down, this is how that they will win, it's probably the defense playing its butt off and Florida throwing you multiple either defensive scores or turnovers which set up short fields. So that is something to look out for here. Offensively, I don't really think that FSU can block Florida given the offensive line injuries that it's had. UF is playing hard. They don't have great speed off the edge, but I'm not really sure that that's going to matter. They do strike well. They're heavy-handed, and they have a lot of size up front, which I think will probably bother FSU's offensive line quite a bit. Luke Kromenhoek played pretty well last game. I thought made some nice plays, some nice throws. Obviously, it wasn't all great. There was some choppiness to it, but it just kind of is where this team is right now, and they're playing out the string on the season and have been for a number of weeks. I don't think FSU is going to lay down to start the game, but much like my analysis against Miami, if the offense can't move the ball and the defense doesn't communicate well, it's hard to see them giving tremendous championship effort, for 4 quarters. Maybe they will. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I'm not entirely sure that I will be. So, yeah, that's kind of your Florida preview. I don't know how much more you want. I think you have a special team's edge and a pretty good one there, but you've had that in basically every game this season. FSU has one of the best special teams in the country, and yet it hasn't mattered. They have 2 wins. So yeah, about that. All right, so let's get to some other stuff. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about some Patreon questions that we have. We got a lot of questions about quarterback, which I totally understand because it's the most important position on the field. And patreon.com/Nolecast. This segment, of course, is brought to you by our friends at Congruity. And I have a new landing spot for you guys to go. Matt at congruityhr.com. That's Matt at congruityhr.com. I think we've had about 10 Nolecast listeners take their business to Congruity. If you want to optimize your business, whether that's payroll, HR, business solutions, logistics, whatever you need, I think you owe it to yourself and to your business to give Matt a call. I think you should do it. Matt at congruityhr.com is the new email that you can hit him up at if you want to. Tell him we sent you here from the Nolecast. I know Graham's worked with them a ton as well with Battle's End. So, question here. If you roll with Luke and get a transfer, is Brock Glenn gone? I would say yes, with possibly the limited exception of, like, is Brock Glenn, is he gone if you bring in like some kind of like grad transfer depth only piece, maybe like a guy who wants to be a coach at some point? But I don't really know that this is the type of team that would be looking to add that type of player, given that you already have multiple scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. You have an incoming freshman, and you have obviously the walk-on situation there, which will be going away because walk-ons are going away from Orlando. So you're going to have multiple capable bodies on this roster in terms of physically capable. Now we'll see how they develop over the offseason. We'll see how they develop, throughout the rest of the season. But yeah, I think most likely they're going to have to walk a delicate balance if they choose to bring in a transfer this offseason. And I would be pretty shocked if they do bring in a transfer and both Luke and Brock stay. Now, that's not me saying that I know that those guys will leave, because I don't know that. But I suspect that if you bring in a high-profile transfer, like somebody who you're bringing in to come in and start and be the guy for whatever offense you're going to run, and yes, we'll get to that in a second. I think if you bring in a high-profile guy, you do run the risk of losing at least one, if not both, of those guys. So, yeah. Follow-up question, do we care? Luke and Brock have both shown some promising signs this year. I think the environment in which they have had to kind of show and prove has been incredibly challenging. Obviously, multiple coaches on the staff know that they're going to be let go at some point. You have major offensive line injuries. You have some whiffs at the receiver position, and also some injuries there. But this whole season is not just injury-based, but it is a part of what has gone wrong with this season. And I think that's really hard as a redshirt freshman or as a true freshman, neither of whom are phenoms, but they're both physically talented players who do have some real upside that the Noles would hope to capture. I think that's extremely tough to judge them based solely on their on-field performance. They're really going to have to lean, Mike and Tony and those guys and the new OC on what they've seen in practice as well, and what they've seen in terms of growth on the chalkboard and with the iPad work and that kind of thing to see the full picture. And I do think you kind of have to trust their judgment on this, but if you don't, I also understand that given what happened this year with bringing in DJU. So do we care if one leaves? Some of it depends on how good the player is who you're bringing in, right? If you bring in one. And I'm not really entirely convinced that they do. Which leads me into the next question. Does FSU need a transfer quarterback? I am a little bit split on this, and for multiple reasons. I am split because I don't know what sort of offense FSU is going to run. I can tell you what I think they will run, and I can do that now. And then let's lead that into basically the conversation of allocation of resources. What is the best and highest use of those resources this offseason? So when I look at this roster right now, I see some talented but really inconsistent receivers who are young, who are probably not going to be like totally finished product, superstars next season. I see some young tight ends who are kind of ditto, right? Like very talented, but also super young. I see some young offensive linemen who do have some promise, who I think for 25 will be better run blockers than they are pass blockers. So keep that in mind. And I see a pretty nice stable of backs, honestly, who have some real talent, who I think you could sort of build an offense around. And you have a quarterback in Luke who has excellent mobility, and Brock has some mobility. I also think that in the transfer market, it is likely to be easier to get more of a runner than a thrower. And when I think about what would need to happen to have a really, really good passing offense next year, I have a hard time envisioning all of those things coming together to allow FSU to have a real king, passing offense next year. Can they have one that runs the football well, utilizes quarterback run game, some different scheme stuff, maybe stay healthier on the offensive line, maybe get some guys who are perhaps a little bit less upside, but also a little more proven, so less downside risk? I think that's pretty possible in the portal. If you told me, like, hey, they're going to be a really, really good passing offense next year, I think you'd probably need a different quarterback. You would need like multiple transfer receivers. I don't know that you can get the offensive lineman to pass protect like you want in one offseason. So I think that whoever they're going to bring in, I would predict here that it will have a strong element of threatening the defense with quarterback mobility. It doesn't mean run the quarterback 20 times a game or anything like that. But I think if you wanted to go get a transfer, you could. I also think that there are some transfers out there who are clearly going to be better than what I think is the most likely outcome for Croman Hoke or Brock Glenn in 2025. But I could certainly be wrong about what that likely outcome is for those guys. Very possible. So I don't know that you have to go get a transfer out there. And I'm not even really sure that you can sign a transfer of the quality that you really want. Sorry, there's a text about this right now, actually. So, in taking a look at that, I'm thinking here, like, what is the best and highest use of your resources? And by that, I mean, house settlement money and NIL money, which are kind of one and the same, but also not. And if you think that the house settlement's going to cover it all, I think you got another thing coming, because teams are not going to stop spending. There's a whole lot of people out there who don't have enough cash to own a pro team, but definitely would like to be involved with helping the success of the college team, which they went to. All right. So let's say you have a certain pot of money. What is like the best use of this money? If you have to waste, I shouldn't say waste, back that up. If you have to spend a whole lot of money on the transfer portal to get a quarterback, and you think you really need it, then you go do it. However, if you think you can get away with, not get away, but if you just have some confidence that another offseason is going to help Brock and Luke, maybe in a new scheme, well, definitely in somewhat of a new scheme, but perhaps the new scheme will help those guys as well. I think there's a pretty good argument to make that you spend more of that money fixing the floor, not necessarily the ceiling, fixing the floor of your offensive line for 2025, so that you're not depending on all these young guys to be hits all at the same time. But you don't drop below certain, maybe a certain minimum threshold. I think that matters. Defensive line is probably going to need a lot of help. I'll talk about that in a second in terms of what we think we can see with the defensive coordinator hire. But I don't know that you need to get a transfer QB. And I kind of didn't want to take one this year, if you recall, but I understood why they did. Now, I don't want to use hindsight bias and be like, hey, like DJ sucked this year. I mean, he did, but they didn't know that at the time. I think there were a lot of things that went wrong with this football team. Some perhaps foreseeable with hindsight bias, and some I don't think entirely foreseeable. So, it's not something that I'm banging the table that they should not take a transfer quarterback. That's going to be up to the OC and Mike and whoever the quarterback's coach is. I'm assuming Tony, but maybe I shouldn't assume. I don't know. A lot of that's going to depend on who you hire. what kind of scheme you want to run, who you think you can go out and get in the transfer portal. If you decide to go get somebody, I'm sure you'll take a look because you would not be doing your due diligence to not look, and how much that player would cost. I know that quarterback's the most important position, and it can really, really raise the floor and, of course, the ceiling of a team. But if you think you like who you have some with the mobility of Luke, and they have shown some flashes, they have made some really good throws. They've also had some struggles, of course. Luke hasn't even played that much quarterback, kind of the same for Brock since he's had some injury stuff. Then I think you roll with him and you try to bolster this roster at the other spots. And we'll see how that goes. All right, another Patreon question here. Does a Band-Aid quarterback in 2025 hamper development? I hear this a lot. Like, you want to play the guy. I'm guilty of saying this, right? Let's put the guy out there. Let's get him some reps. Okay, and I don't disagree with the thought. I don't know that there is actual evidence that shows that is the way to do or not to do it. In the NFL, they've kind of gone back and forth. Do you want to play the guy immediately? Do you want to sit the guy? I think more often they play the guy, but that's also like some salary cap concerns and some pressure on the team to win now. I would echo that, though. I don't think that FSU is in a spot to really be – not FSU. I don't think the staff is in a spot to really be caring about 26. They have to kind of be all in on 25 because if they don't do well in 25, even though the buyout remains large, there's a chance that 26 is somebody else's problem. And so you have to kind of just go all in the moment there and try to be really good in that moment. I do a podcast 5 times a week with a guy named Denny Cannell who sat on the bench for a couple of years until he was ready. I don't think that necessarily not playing hampers your development as long as you're getting good quality practice reps. So I don't know. That's an interesting one to me. Another Patreon question here. How many new players do we expect? Shoot. 35, 40, 45? Quite a few. I mean, you're going to have a good number of players leave this roster. I think you probably should. You're going to bring in a lot of new players, high school, more portal than I think you wanted to at this time last year. But obviously, things change. Life changes. You got to adapt. You got to be able to be nimble, and you got to just focus on the process and keep putting out the best effort every single day. So I would say 35, 40 plus new players on this roster, most likely. Not all of them will be like major contributors. Some will probably be some form of depth, but it's certainly possible. All right. Okay, what else do we have here today? All right, now let's get into a little bit of coordinator talk. So this segment is brought to you by Charlie Park Rooftop Restaurant. That's Charlie Park Rooftop Restaurant. Charlie Park, part of the For the Table group. Obviously, Madison Social, Township. You guys know the deal. Charlie Park, awesome brunch, drinks, dinner. It's just a great spot. And I think with this weather right now, we're having even better. All right. So first of all, I really appreciate you guys asking all these questions. It does make it easier to do a show when we get questions, especially if you're monologuing it right now. But we do have probably some changes coming to the show in the off season. Not every experiment will work or not work or will work in the way first intended. So can you talk about Brennan Marion and the Tulsa job and other jobs which might come open? Sure. So Brennan Marion, to refresh, we talked about him on the last episode. He is the offensive coordinator at UNLV. He was not the first choice at UNLV. That was Bobby Petrino, who was there for a hot minute before he left to go to Texas A&M, I think. And obviously Petrino is now at Arkansas, but he's done a nice job there for Barry Odom, the head coach at UNLV. To refresh, they run kind of like a spread option type offense. There's a lot of multiple backs in the backfield sets. And I think what he runs would likely fit in Tallahassee. He's a really good marketer, but I do think he's a better coach than he's given credit for, probably. Obviously, like calling it the go-go offense, if it works, great. If it doesn't, then you get made fun of if you call it the go-go. So that's kind of what you got there. Now, he played at Tulsa, I believe, and Tulsa recently fired head coach Kevin Wilson. So I don't know what that would look like. I don't know how much Kevin Wilson was making, but I can look it up literally right on air here. Kevin Wilson. Tulsa's a very hard job, I think, in the in the grand scheme of things, especially under the current setup that we have in college football. So Kevin Wilson left Ohio State. He was making 1.4. Tulsa's a private school, so they don't have to list his salary. I'm assuming he was making, $2 million-ish, but I can text some agents and find out, I guess, if we have to. But regardless, would you rather have the FSU job, or would you rather have the Tulsa head coach job? Or would you rather have, maybe the Wisconsin job, which is also open? I don't know. Obviously, Wisconsin is throwing out some serious money in NIL right now. I think NIL played a pretty big part in the Carter Smith recruitment, the quarterback who FSU was eyeing to replace Jones, who went to the UF. But I think FSU's current strategy is probably a little more focused on transfers, given the hot seat nature of what you got right now on the coaching staff. They're probably not looking to sink a whole bunch of money into the high school ranks right now at positions where you already are, maybe not set, but certainly deeper than some of the other positions that you have. So back to Marion. People are like, oh, well, he might make more at FSU as a coordinator, but that's on a per year basis. Two things. One, anybody worth their salt who you're going to get to come, you're going to have to give them a multi-year contract. I think that just needs to be understood from Jump Street here. Multi-year deal is going to be required for anybody who's going to come. So whether you think it's only going to last a year, whether you think it's going to be 3 years, you're probably going to have to give them a 2 or 3 year deal. This is going to cost you probably 5 over 3, I would guess, to get somebody really, really good and proven, and also to get them to accept the risk of uprooting their family and that kind of stuff, right? Because there's a chance that this staff absolutely turns it around, gets back to winning ball games like they have here in Tallahassee the last couple of years and also at prior stops. And there's a chance that it completely goes south and does not get out of the gutter. Or there's also a pretty likely chance that it improves, maybe not ultimately to the heights that you want it to. And that's largely, I think, due to misses in high school recruiting and loss of momentum, some of which is your fault and some of which is not. So with Marion, I think that what you can't afford to have happen here is to have this thing drag out a whole lot. Now, UNLV is a real contender to play in the Mountain West Conference Championship game against Boise. So if they win that, they're probably not going to go to the playoff. So that should be wrapped up, I think, by the end of next weekend. There are other guys out there who, we don't know what's going to happen with Arbuckle at Washington State. There's been a lot of Oklahoma rumors there. Craddock, I've seen rumored to the Tulane offensive coordinator. I've seen rumored to Wisconsin as well. I don't think any of that is certain at this point. Also got an interesting Patreon question. What about a Chip Kelly type situation where you got a guy who's a good play caller, good offensive mind, but he's tired of all the the BS that comes with being a head coach. And there's a lot of stuff you got to deal with as a college head coach right now. I think overall they're probably still overpaid relative to the players. If you look at the NFL salary structure, Mahomes makes 4x what Andy Reid makes, and he should. The quarterback is way more important than the head coach. But in college, probably not by 4x, because the head coach is also, in many cases, the kind of the real decision maker as far as being a GM. Derek Ray has a GM title, but in the NFL, the GM can tell the head coach what to do and who they're going to draft. In college, it's just not that way. The head coach stamps all the offers and all the moves they make in the portal. So ultimately, it kind of runs to him. I'm curious to see, is there somebody who could shake loose that way? Hey, you know what? I like this guy a lot. Maybe he's tired of, being a G5 or some low-level P5 program's head coach, and maybe doesn't like what he has coming back. And I'm done with this, man. I just want to call plays. And in today's day and age, Chip Kelly doesn't have to recruit a whole lot. So that's a pretty interesting question I got there. I don't know who that would be or how exactly that would shake out, but it does kind of make you think in the absence of some of the names that have been coming up in the search lately. Again, I do think that the offensive coordinator who they hire, unless he's bringing his own quarterback, is probably going to be run game heavy, because I think you can get your offensive line to be a good run blocking offensive line faster than you can a good pass blocking offensive line with the help of a quarterback mobility featured scheme. That's what I think you're going to see this team run next year. I think it fits what Mike Norvell largely wants to do. he has not always been a QB like run game guy, but he has always been a run game guy, despite the fact that he's a receivers coach by trade. He played receiver and obviously, coached receiver. So that's just with the current roster, with what I think will be available in the transfer portal, and with what I think Mike wants to do. That's kind of what I would expect. I don't have any additional names for you guys, but that's just what I think we're going to see given this roster. And I wouldn't rule out a Chip Kelly type. I think that's certainly possible. I also think it's pretty important that you get this defensive coordinator hire done like fairly fast, because you're going to have to revamp some of this defensive roster in the portal. And you're going to have to figure out what you want to have on the defensive staff. Like, do you want to keep both line coaches? Do you want to have one line coach? If so, is that guy on staff or is it not? I don't know what's going to happen there. But I am curious, like, what do you want to run? What do you think you should run? They don't have a lot of impact defensive linemen on this team right now, and those guys are going to be extremely expensive in the portal. So my general thought here is that that's going to cost a lot of money, and you probably need to hire somebody who can put a coordinated defense on the field without dominating on the lines of scrimmage, because you have not recruited defensive line well as a position like at all. And we have called this out on the show multiple times. We don't need to recount all the misses. Williams, Falk, we can keep doing more and more and more, I guess. But ultimately, like, that's not great. So I am curious to see what they can do, whether that means you're going to run like some 3-3-5 stuff, whether you're going to run like some 3-2 Iowa State stuff. There's a lot of different defenses to run. Maybe that's some 4-2. There's a lot of different stuff you could run. I don't think you're going to have a defense that is just completely reliant on dominating people up front. Or if you do, that's probably just dumb, because I don't think you're going to have the personnel to do so unless you get some of these guys to come back, which also from like a leadership perspective, I don't know that you really, really want them to, I guess, if that makes sense. I talked about this a little bit in the preseason. Like, some of your best players or most talented players are not necessarily the best leaders. And that's kind of an issue. So I think that's pretty much what I have for this week. Don't expect FSU to beat Florida. It would not be like the most shocking upset of the season. Certainly they have played much better down the stretch, the Gators, than the Noles have. Do we need a score prediction? Did I even give a score prediction here? Shoot, let me see what I got. Let's go. I can't believe this team is so damn bad that I'm having to like just kind of, oh yeah, a score prediction for the damn Florida State game. What are we doing here? I unbelievable. As I do this, and I didn't play this game, so I kind of got to ask myself, like, do I really trust this? Let's say, I don't know, Florida 31, FSU 13. Can FSU score 2 touchdowns? I don't know. It would require getting some turnovers on defense. Maybe they can. I think UF's run game is probably what they'll rely on to see if they, if they can just rely on a low variance approach. So that's what I got there. If you see DC choices, try to take a look at them and see if they have the capability of winning without like elite defensive line talent. I don't know. So I will check y'all next time. Be well. Happy Thanksgiving.